fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey Seahawks fans, welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. We're going to poke around the NFC West today in this show to kind of find out what our competition has been doing in the division. Arizona, the Los Angeles Rams, and the 49ers. We already know what Seattle's been up to. We talk about them all the time. Let's talk about those other three and find out if we have anything to fear this year, or if Seattle's going to rise above with our rebuilt roster, especially after the draft, and be in competition for this division. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Let's, I just kind of was a little bit surprised researching this show. Arizona's done more than I realized, which is good because they were terrible last year.
As in firing people?
Yeah, they fired a bunch of people, and they actually signed a couple people that are good and released some bad contracts that they were dealing with. So
okay. Yeah. So, maybe.
I still don't they're still not going to be great, but
your favorite coach in the world was fired in the offseason. They started that right away by getting rid of Cliff Kingsbury, and GM Steve Keim walked away from his job, and so both replaced. Seems like that the general manager that they hired is competent. I watched his press conference. I live here in Arizona, in Phoenix. So I get the local stuff occasionally, and I watched him being interviewed. Seems like a real great guy, wants to do the right things, saying all the right things. They hired Jonathan Gannon as their head coach. I think that's a big improvement. I think defense is going to be their priority. They were awful last year. I think allowed one of the league worst 449 points on defense, and their offense was horrible compared to the years prior. They had the injury, obviously, of Kyler Murray with the ACL in his right knee on an untouched play in late December, and he's not going to be ready to go possibly by the start of the season, although they say that he's ahead of schedule, but that could mean anything at this point in the season. So other than that, Keith, why don't you fire ahead and tell me what moves you liked as far as dispatching players and signing guys?
Well, I mean, this was an old team. That it's not just when you're bad, but when you're bad and old is when you really don't have a lot of hope. And seeing guys like AJ Green finally, disappear, Marcus Golden, Justin Pugh, Byron Murphy. Well, I guess Byron Murphy's was young, but he didn't play that well last year.
Well, he came into the league with a lot of promise, and it just didn't work out for him.
Yeah, Anderson, the wide receiver, was making way too much money.
Rodney Hudson, they released Rodney Hudson.
Yeah, so they've gone through and cleaned up the roster quite a bit. And then they've brought some the guys they brought in, Kevin Strong as an interior offensive lineman is going to be a decent rotation player for them. And honestly, Kazir White at linebacker, I think was a very underrated signing, especially at that cost. I like that. Losing Zach Allen to the Broncos is interesting.
Gonna hurt. I like Zach Allen. He's a good base defensive end, but
he is.
He needs a special role on a team to be a good fit. And I think Seattle was looking at him, actually.
Yeah, I think they were too. And I mean, it's weird because the Broncos gave up Trey Jones to Seattle, who's 25, and but then turned around and gave similar money to Zach Allen, who I think is not as good of a player. So, but yeah, it's going to hurt to lose. It's going to hurt to lose Zach Allen. Let's not, sugarcoat that. That's going to be hard on them. But I think overall what you see is a lot of like, okay, they knew they needed to reset. And so there's a lot of guys that are going to be gone that honestly, those contracts were kind of bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys they brought back and brought in are younger guys.
I just signed a guy today that I really like.
Which one?
Zach Pascal, on a 2-year deal, wide receiver. He's familiar with Jonathan Gannon, together with the Colts and the Eagles. And Gannon's just a nice, well-rounded wide receiver. I think he's going to bring it just as much value as AJ Green did. AJ Green was not doing anything for them. Sometimes hurt, didn't go through practices during the week, and so Kyler Murray never built a rapport with him. And so I like this. I like that signing for them.
Yeah, but overall,
I like
go ahead.
Jonathan Gannon as their head coach pick. I thought the process that they went through was not great. They waited a little while. They didn't. They had some coaches brought in that basically told them that they didn't want the job because Kyler Murray is difficult to work with. Essentially, is what is being reported, and that comes down to the personality and the just being immature with that situation. And they have a contract with Kyler Murray they're not going to be able to get out of for like 3 years.
Yeah.
And he's hurt now. And so we'll see what happens there at the quarterback position. I'm not sure really, if Colt McCoy is going to be the guy or if they're going to, get somebody in the draft or who knows. But they're going to be bottom dwellers this year. And not only just in the NFC West, in the NFL.
They're not going to be good. I think that's pretty clear. Unless Kyler Murray comes back healthy and takes that step forward that everyone's been expecting for a couple of years and hasn't happened. This is a team they're not going to be good. And but I think they're on the right track here with the way that they've just gotten rid of so many of these old guys that these bad contracts are going to get themselves some cap space going into a year from now. They're going to be able to kind of rebuild the roster a little bit, and they've done all of this while also replacing the worst coach in the NFL with someone who, like you said, appears competent. We'll see what happens when the season gets here. But so far, he looks like a guy who actually knows what it takes to run an NFL team, unlike Kingsbury, who clearly didn't belong.
And they've got a good draft. I mean, they've got the number 3 overall pick. I think that they should probably go Will Anderson there. Best defensive player available at 3, unless they trade out of that pick and decide to pick up further value, which would also be a decent thing for them to do since they have so many needs. I would be inclined to do that. One player is not going to solve your problem if they were able to drop down to a quarterback needy team from 3 and pick up an additional first round pick in 2024 and a second and a fourth or something in this draft to do that. I would do it. But if Will Anderson's there, that's a no-brainer as well for them to do, and would immediately help them, I think, on the defensive side, start to build a new core, because their defense is just not good.
Their defense is bad.
Their offense, look at their offensive roster, it's not bad, especially at the skilled positions. But
their offensive line is rough.
And it has been, but you know what? They doubled down. They got Will Hernandez back and Kevin Beachum and Josh Jones. I mean, it's kind of a weird, and they jettisoned Hudson, so they're going to need a center. They need some help. They need some help. They need some offensive line. They could go offensive line in this draft and get a couple guys, I think, in the second round, third round. But they're going to be at the bottom for a couple of years until they work this thing out and kind of build the roster. Hopefully they give their GM and their head coach an opportunity to build this thing. I think any competent owner would say that this is a 3-year project at a minimum.
Does Arizona have a competent owner?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question.
I mean, the guy signed Cliff Kingsbury to be head coach like a week after he got fired for failing as a college coach. So I'm
skeptical.
Skeptical.
Yeah, you're right. So we'll see what happens. Okay.
I mean, I don't think they are Houston incompetent, but we'll see. They deserve a chance to see what happens.
Let's talk about the team in the division that bought a Super Bowl and then paid its bills.
Yeah.
The Los Angeles Rams.
Honestly, people are looking at them going, oh, look, this is why you don't do that. This is, they're because everything is just falling apart for them and whatever. And you're like, they got a championship. I'm not sure what you're worried about.
Well, this is what every team tries to do. I mean, this is their best case scenario. They went out and got Matthew Stafford, won a Super Bowl. They stayed healthy in that year, and then the next year they fell off a cliff. And they were 5-12 last year. The offense only scored 307 points, one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Stafford was out quite a bit with injury to his elbow. I think he's coming back full health right now, but they let Jalen Ramsey walk in a trade
for nothing.
This offseason. Leonard Floyd is left, not signed yet. Baker Mayfield, who came in to fill in for Matthew Stafford, re-signed a new contract with the Buccaneers. Bobby Wagner, Ashawn Robinson, Troy Hill, all gone. Taylor Rapp, quite a few other people. Malcolm Brown, one of their backup running backs.
Leonard Floyd, one of their top edge players, is gone.
Yeah.
I mean,
that'd be a good ad actually for Seattle.
Yeah. I mean,
this is needing that.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's 31, so he's a guy that, people are going to look at and be like, okay, if you're a team that's win now mode, he's a guy that you go get, but he isn't, that's not a long-term, acquisition for you. But you look at what happened last year, really what's happened in the last few years. The Rams have been in the market for old players, and then somehow they managed to stay healthy, and that's how the Rams have kind of been good.
And they bought it all with a credit card.
Yeah, and so it bought it all with a credit card on old players that stayed healthy, and it worked. It got them a Super Bowl and all of that. But the credit card bill came due, and that's part of what's going on. Is their cap situation is just terrible, which is why you had to see Jalen Ramsey, Bobby Wagner, and Leonard Floyd all get cut. Well, I guess Jalen Ramsey was traded, but still, there was talk that he might get cut anyways because they had to get under the cap. And you're going to see all these other guys not get re-signed because they can't afford them. The other part of it is that last year they were just decimated by injuries. Well, they were eventually that injury luck is going to come back to you. They've had some of the best injury luck in the entire NFL for the 3 years prior to that.
Yes.
So they were going to have a bad year. And especially as all these guys get older, it's going to happen. And so now you're starting to see this is a team that they've got to make some decisions. Are they going to, basically wait on this and hope that the salary cap situation freeze everything up in a year and they can make another run next year? Or are they going to recognize that this team got real old and they're not going to be able to run this back and do it again because the guys aren't going to be the same that they were when they won it all. So it's very interesting to see what's going to happen.
So today, Sean McVay came out and said he's re-upping. He's back. He's going to see this thing out. Does that surprise you at all? This thing's going to be not just a minor reset. This is a full-on rebuild.
It doesn't surprise me at all. He's still, when they signed him to be a head coach, he was the youngest in the NFL, and he's still a great coach and all that kind of stuff. But for him, it would be more of just needing a break, wanting a chance to reset, and not wanting to lose for a couple of years, which would be why he'd do that. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, he wants to be an NFL head coach. He wants to continue to do this job. He's still young, still very good at it. And being able to take this team that he took to the Super Bowl and rebuild it back into a contender again over a couple of years, I think is a nice challenge for him.
Yeah. So what's going to happen with Matthew Stafford?
I think he's coming back for another year, and that way they can kind of get out from underneath the cap issues that they're having, and then they'll see if they can, lose him and draft a quarterback a year from now, because I think this team's not going to be good.
Yeah, they're still paying for the trade there with Jared Goff this year as well.
Yep.
Okay. So do you see them finishing last or second to last in the division?
I could see them finishing second to last. There's still talent here, more than in Arizona. I mean, they still have the best defensive lineman in the NFL. Matthew Stafford hopefully will stay healthy longer for them.
Yeah.
And
Cooper and they have Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, Cooper Kupp, and he's one of the best receivers. There's a lot of talent here. It just last year, it was all hurt. And this year there's going to be a lot less because all these guys are gone, but there's still a lot of good players that I think that can get you some wins, that Arizona just doesn't have. And so I see them more as the third place team. They're going to be a team that's going to be super annoying for Seattle, because Seattle's weakness on offense is the interior defensive line. That's the strength of the Rams. And that just continues to be a thing. And it is every single year for Seattle.
So let's talk about Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch and the San Francisco 49ers, 13-4 class of the division in 2022. There's no doubt about it. One of the most talented rosters in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And they made one of the biggest first moves in free agency of any team in the NFL, and signing Javon Hargrave to a massive deal, paying him $21 million APY to come in and be their nose tackle, which it's a great move for them. Pairing with an already existing tremendous defensive line.
That's a brutal move if you're a Seahawk, because you look at that, Armstead, Bosa, and now Hargrave as they're on their defensive line. Those are three Pro Bowlers, three guys that are
all pros.
And I mean, that's ugly. Now, honestly, I think there were other ways they could have spent that money that I think would have maybe had a bigger effect in their win total. Even on defense, I think their back end cornerback especially could use some help. But
because even Javon Hargrave is only going to play 64% of the snaps.
Yeah, last year he played 64.4 for the Eagles. And he's 30, so he's not old, but this isn't a guy that's ascending and getting better, right? This is just what he is, which is fantastic. But at some point there will be a decline in there. But I think that if you look at defensive lines, if theirs isn't the best in the NFL, I couldn't tell you who is better, because that's just a fantastic group, and it's an already really talented roster, top to bottom. They did lose some guys, but they re-signed some guys. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo's gone. Okay, I don't think anyone cares that much. They brought in Sam Darnold to replace him. That's interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting signing, considering their quarterback situation, which is brutal. It just is, by anybody's stretch. They had a rough year at the quarterback position last year.
Yeah, three major injuries to quarterbacks that were starting.
So. It turned out they found potentially their quarterback of the future, who in his last game, hurt his elbow so bad he might not be able to throw properly again. It's one of those injuries. Mm-hmm. Hopefully it was successful for him. Obviously, he's just starting his career, but that's tough. And so you've got to have a guy that's able to come in and compete with that right away. So with Trey Lance. So Trey Lance has also been recovering from an injury. I assume that he's going to be ready to go at the first of the year. Brock Purdy's not. Brock Purdy probably ends up sitting out the entire year in 2023. We'll see what happens. So you've got the Trey Lance, Sam Darnold show for them, potentially. I think that hurts them, actually, as far as being better than their record was in 2022. Like 13 wins is hard to do in the NFL. A little easier now that there's 17 games, but nonetheless, that's a decent record. how do you see, you mentioned they lost Garoppolo, they lost Beckham, they lost Emmanuel Mosley, their corner, Mike McGlinchey, their right tackle is gone. Shear, their linebacker, Al Shear, one of their starting guys, their kickers unresigned, and Robbie Gould, been there forever.
He's 41. I bet
Hassan
they
Ridgeway.
go other ways. Yeah. And then you also threw in a couple of edge guys, Charles Omanahu and Samson Beckham.
Yes. Yeah.
A couple of it. So they're going to have to reload a little bit. They're going to have to reset. I mean, this is when you have arguably the best roster top to bottom in the NFL. Philly would disagree with that. Honestly, they're 1-2 in my opinion.
I agree.
And pick whichever one is 1 and 2. You're going to lose a bunch of guys, and that's fine because they've still got depth. That roster was just that good. So I think they'll come back down to earth a little bit, but you nailed it. It comes down for them, it's the quarterback position, because they started out with Trey Lance, and he looked okay, but not great. Then he got hurt, and then they got to bring Garoppolo in, who had been basically told to stay away from the team because they didn't want a quarterback controversy. But then he re-signed to a pay cut, and then now suddenly had to start. And so it took a little bit for him to get involved. This was a team that was 3-3. They ended up 13-4, right? That'll give you an idea of how once they got things going. And then Brock Purdy came in when Garoppolo went down and looked great. So Purdy's going to be out probably till midseason, maybe all year. Trey Lance is going to get another opportunity, which is probably, for the 49ers, not a bad thing, given that what they the 3 first-round picks they gave up to get him, to get one more chance to see if there's anything usable there. My guess is that he'll probably be better this year, just more prep and all of that. He was a guy that was kind of a project, so more opportunity for him to learn over this last year, even though he was hurt. So I think he'll be a little better. But if he's not, or if he gets hurt again, now you're looking at kind of a mess, because you're Sam Darnold, who we can all agree now is not a not
if there's anybody that can, there's two or three OCs in the league that I think that could work with Sam Darnold and make him at least palatable. And and they've got Kyle Shanahan is one of those guys that can make him work with Chris Forrester and Clint Kubiak. I think that will get him to a point where he's efficient in that offense. So we'll see.
And I agree with that. Efficient, sure, good. I think that ship has sailed a little bit. But yeah, he could be serviceable. I mean, that offense is really quarterback friendly.
It is. And it's a well-oiled machine.
Yep. And there's a lot to like there. And there's still a draft coming up where they're going to be able to add some weapons and stuff to that. But, they don't have a first-round pick, so that makes life a little harder. But when it all comes down to it is, this may be a team that's sitting around waiting for Brock Purdy to get healthy and just trying to stay in it for the first 8 games until they can get Purdy in there and lead them, towards a towards the playoffs and stuff.
How much pressure comes with that kind of strategy?
A lot. That is a lot of pressure on a guy, Brock Purdy, who's got like 7 really good games under his belt, but that's all at the NFL level. I mean, if Trey Lance doesn't come out and win a bunch of games for you, if he looks, average, mediocre, or worse, and you're sitting waiting for Brock Purdy to get healthy,
and you're losing games, and every game is just
or brutal. Even if you're winning half your games and you're 500, but you're still waiting for that guy to get healthy to lead your team because you got to get into the playoffs and whatnot, then that's just you're banking a lot on a guy that's just had a elbow reconstruction done, and That's rough. I mean, it's going to be, we'll see what his arm looks like when he gets back and whether he can still make all those throws, because that was a brutal injury.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. All right. Question for you. So after the draft, and anticipating Seattle adding a certain amount of talent to their roster, where does our roster stack up against the NFC West?
I think the Seahawks will have the second best roster in the division behind San Francisco.
Even after the draft.
Even after the draft. Find me the true weakness other than quarterback on the 49ers. Even with the guys they lost, what's the true weakness of that? Like, what position group?
Third wide receiver.
I'd say that they're better than
right
Seattle
tackle,
with that.
Right tackle right now. They've got Colton McKivitz as their starter. Backup tight end. Third running back. You asked me.
I know. I'm saying, fine. Like, this is the challenge. This is with the guys they've lost.
Yeah,
I would say
maybe one of their corners, maybe Demondre or Lenore could be upgraded.
A cornerback,
but they could do that in the draft.
Yep, and they need an edge rusher, at least one. It's just the nature of they have lost a couple of guys. They need some guys to come in and take that spot and produce that. But there isn't a weakness. These are positions where, like, okay, maybe there's question marks. Right tackle, yeah, I'll give you that one because they lost Muglinski, and that's gonna be a tough one. But maybe that's where they use one of their high draft picks is to get them a.
I agree.
A right tackle of the future and that kind of stuff. So that cornerback, and then you've got some rotational pieces. You can get those in a draft.
Right.
And so you're kind of looking at a situation where I think this is a great roster outside of quarterback. And even at quarterback, the idea that Trey Lance is super young, the idea that he is guaranteed to be bad is, I think, way overblown. I think he's still got all the talent in the world, and he just needed time to adapt and learn. And he's still super young.
So Seattle won 9 games last year. Everyone's talking about after the draft and the improving roster that Seattle could get to 11 wins.
Okay.
Now do the same exercise we just did for San Francisco with Seattle's roster.
Well, Seattle's interior offensive line is still bad. They don't have. They need a running back. They need 2 wide receivers. They need help on the defensive line. Even with the 2 guys they've added, they still have no depth. They have 0 things going for them at linebacker, and they need to figure out what's going to happen at safety because, yeah, sure, they've got one guy at the free safety, but then there's kind of we'll see what happens at strong safety and the backups. There's just a lot of issues there, and especially the defensive front 7, the depth is not good.
So the holes are just bigger. The holes are just bigger. And what you're going to end up doing is in 2023, you're going to depend in a similar way to your draft class that you did in 2022. We're expecting a certain amount of players. I'm going to just say 4. They probably want at least 4 starters to come out of this draft. 2 on the offensive line, potentially at least 1 at linebacker, and potentially 1 at nose tackle. And we'll see how everything else unfolds. But you're looking at a second running back potentially drafted. You're looking at a third wide receiver, fourth possibly. So you're looking at quite a few young players having an immediate impact on your roster in 2023, whereas the 49ers could go through this draft and not have anybody turn out up their draft and still be the best roster in the NFC West.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're going to need some young players to step up and play. It's not like they can get nothing out of their draft. They need a right tackle. They need a safety. They need a cornerback.
Second tight end, etc. Right.
Yeah, I mean, they're there's things that they need in order to, return to where they were last year, but the holes are smaller, and a lot of what they need are rotation guys, other than right tackle and maybe safety. Whereas in Seattle, they need upgrades at positions, especially middle linebacker and on the defensive line and at either center or right guard. Like they need upgrades still, and they can't afford to go get them in free agency at this point. They're depending on the draft. So, but that's not to say that the Seahawks also have a better quarterback room, a better quarterback position than the 49ers. And that means a lot in the NFL. And if they improve the offensive line a little bit, get another running back, and really help Geno Smith out, that could make a huge difference in the win total because quarterbacks matter. And so as good as the 49ers roster is top to bottom, they have a lot of question marks in the most important position. And so that is cause for concern for them. I still think that they win the division. I think Seattle is in position to push them a lot harder than they did last year, right? They were 4 games behind. I think it's more like
lost 3 games last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think Seattle can push them a lot harder and make it closer. And if Trey Lance really does fall on his face, then the division's there for Seattle to take. But they're still a year away from having a roster that's on par with San Francisco. They just built a really, really nice roster over the last few years, and
they did.
It's paying off.
They did. They did, and they had draft picks, and it just worked out for them. Mm-hmm. But they were bottom dwellers for a while to get there. How would you rank Seattle's roster in the NFC in general, as well as the 49ers? Like, who else has a roster that can compete other than, say, Philadelphia? So Philadelphia, honestly, 49ers, where does Seattle fall?
I'd put Dallas, saying that they've got a good roster, probably, they're maybe third. And Washington, if they can figure out their quarterback situation, actually has a better roster than people realize. The Vikings were a paper tiger last year. They beat up on a lot of bad teams and barely beat them. I don't see them actually being improved.
How about the Giants? Giants were 9-7 last year.
They were, but then they just re-upped their quarterback for $40 million, and he was part of what held them back. So I don't know what's going on.
That was a little weird to me. How about the Lions? 9-8.
The Lions are actually a team that I would be surprised if they don't make the playoffs. I really like Campbell, their coach, and what he's done, and they've slowly built this team. It's young, it's hungry, it's disciplined, and
they come out of the draft with defensive players. That team's gonna be young and hungry. Big time.
Yeah, because the offense, even with Jared Goff at quarterback, the offense scored a lot of points, but their defense was just pathetic. So they need defensive players. They're sitting there. Look, they want that run at quarterbacks to happen, because that means the top defensive players are dropping to them at 6, and they can get their choice. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up getting a guy like Jalen Carter to plug in the middle of that defensive line and instantly make that defense better. But they also need help at corner, the back end. They could use better linebackers. I mean, they just need help at all 3 levels. But overall, like that is an ascending team. And getting Emmanuel Mosley from the 49ers, who's only 27, to be, one of their cornerbacks that's only going to make them better. That's going to help them, keep other teams from scoring 48 points a game like Seattle did against them, and help them win some games. So they're an ascending team. I still think that that the Eagles are they're the team, right? They've lost some key pieces, Hargrave being one of them, to the 49ers. They lost the linebacker to the Arizona Cardinals. They've lost some other pieces, but that's what happens when you have a roster like that and you win a bunch of games, is other teams want your good players and you can't afford to keep them all. So I think they come back down to earth a little bit. So is San Francisco a little bit, but they're still, to me, those rosters are still the class of the NFC. And Seattle and Detroit are teams that are ascending. They're going to push him. So
interesting. Cool. Wow. Fun show. Yeah, it's good. It's good to look at the neighbors once in a while. We don't have to do this again for a bit of time.
Not till after the draft.
Anything else that you can anticipate Seattle doing before free agency basically closes down?
No. I mean, Bobby Wagner, bringing him in to be inside linebacker in this defense, where he'll play next to Bush at the beginning, and next to Brooks at the end of the season once Brooks is healthy. I would see that as being a very anticipated move that seems likely to happen. But other than that, I see Seattle sitting back and waiting. They might go get some vet minimum guys at wide receiver, just to add some names to the mix because they're so thin there. But I don't see them doing much else.
Interesting.
Do you?
Cool. No, John Schneider alluded to the idea that he wasn't done yet as far as the defensive line was concerned. They were talking to a couple of guys, but that was almost 6 days ago now. I would imagine that list is churned a couple times in that amount of time. So I'm not exactly sure. I would imagine if they do bring guys in, it's just role players, minimum contracts, filling out the roster a little bit on depth. But I think we're done with the major splashes. It would surprise me if Bobby Wagner's back. I know that everybody would love that. Bobby Wagner would love that. The players, maybe even the coaches. But at the end of the day, they need to make business decisions, and we'll see what happens there. If Bobby Wagner, I think, comes back on a 1-year deal, like $4.5 million base, fully guaranteed, plus another $3 or $4 million in incentives, and they can do a cap hit of $4.5 million for 2023. I think that's a no-brainer, and they get that deal done. And that's similar to a deal that that Levante David signed, a 1-year deal. Just this morning on similar terms.
And Levante David is a good comp as far as salary and that kind of stuff. Came out the same year, drafted one position apart. Both have been perennial Pro Bowl guys. Wagner's, of course, been better, but he's also lost a step more than David has. And so I just think that that's if that's what it took to get Levante David signed, then the Seahawks should offer it to Bobby Wagner and get that deal done, because they need a guy. They needed someone. He's a leader. The coaches love the fact that they can trust him with everything. And even if he's not the fastest guy anymore, he still makes the team better, and they need that.
Yeah, I was going to look up and see if I can find his contract terms. Levante David, now he made 12. His cap hit last year was $12 million plus some bonus money. Levante David signed a 1-year, $7 million contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I understand from another tweet, I can't remember who it was from, Schefter or something, where his bonus and base, it was like four something $1 million with $3 million in incentives.
Yeah, if you can do that with Wagner, you have his cap number for this year at 4.5, with the likelihood that you're going to lose some cap space next year because he hits those incentives. Do it. Just do it.
Yeah, I think that Levante David going for this actually really helps get Bobby Wagner signed. Bobby's, representing himself. Hats off to him. I think he was waiting for the market to kind of figure itself out, but there's not a big market left for his salary cap in general anyway, and at that position. And so his pool of teams looking at him is pretty small, and Seattle's definitely at the top. I mean, if both he and the team want to get this done, I think it happens actually. But in order for Seattle to do it, they would have to push some things around a little bit. Now, you could save $8 million, $7 million by restructuring Quandre Diggs, for example. That makes a lot of sense to me.
And you can save $9 million by cutting Adams with a June 1st designation. Although you don't get this cap space until June 1st, but you can still earmark,
move that stuff around. Yeah, right.
Yeah, make it happen. And so I still think it would be a good idea, just given that they don't have anything. And I'd rather have Wagner for a year to come in and help the team just bridge through this Brooks injury and help get a draft pick up to speed. I would rather see them do that than run into this year where Bush is your only viable option at a position where you need two guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It'd be like running back Cody Barton as your starter with some rookie as your sidekick. That just wouldn't make any sense. So they do have to do something there. Okay, let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. You know where the show's at when you hit it out there on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.